Let's talk about developing great strategy from strategic planning. I'll start with a few case examples and then get into our approach. The first case is a public insurance company where the board had rejected the executive team's strategic plan. The CFO came to us on behalf of the CEO to help us assess and determine how they should be developing their plan to get approval from the board. So when we assessed what was going on, we found that they really had not clearly articulated their where to play strategy, which was ease of doing business, and then align their priorities against those supporting initiatives against that technology and strategy work that they'd done. Secondly, some of the initiatives that they laid out and the strategies, they had presented them almost as if they were done versus learning. So there was a change in one division in particular where the market had, they had changed the market direction. They had changed the customer targeting. So really a lot of the products that they were launching and developing and proving for growth were in that pilot phase where they needed to learn. So they needed to reframe that as more of a learning and sort of what they were going to do to prove that strategy out versus presenting it as if they had already done all that work. So the results were that we were able to help the executive team really understand how better to express their strategy, tie it to a where to play and how to win option, and package it in a way that the board could accept it, which they did. That plan went on to be presented publicly out to investors. And then that ultimately led to one of their longer term initiatives, which is actually a merger and a sale. So that was the first case. The second one is really helping a president take the organization culturally from a one-year mentality to basically driving a vision and where to play over the long run, over a 3 to 5 year annual long-range plan. So this president was over the division of the brand called Hillshire Farm. It's about $1 billion CPG brand. And he really just wanted to change the culture and the mentality to build multi-year progress versus 1 year progress. So we set up an office. We helped develop a 3 to 5 year long range plan, link that back to their annual operating plan, and work through that strategy process with them. One of the major changes that we identified for them to grow was that they needed to move from being an ingredient brand, like part of the meal, to actually being a meal solution company. That opened up a whole new where to play set of opportunities for them. And eventually that plan built out a 3-year, $100 million innovation gap that they could fill. The next case is a bank merger that happened between two banks. The boards of two banks had courted for several years and finally decided to merge. That combination of board members, leadership, and succession strategy warranted a process to help create that alignment, accountability, and a long-range strat plan. So that's what we did. So after interviewing them and conducting the assessment, we identified the key strategic conversations and topics that we needed to have. Part of the approach was to create an atmosphere of freedom and allow them to really come together and collaborate on those principles for operating as a board, how they were going to make decisions. We covered many of their governance issues and the board culture, actually even board meeting effectiveness. And so that was how we helped them develop, not just their strategy, but also sort of how they were going to operate as an organization and develop strategy together. The last case is a company. This was a boutique food and beverage company in the specialty food market. And they were growing from about $30 million, wanting to develop a long-range plan to grow to $100 million, but stay profitable. So one of the things that we identified with them in the upfront strategy process was that they actually were moving from a gifting company that was sort of bought every once in a while into a wholesale retail establishment where they could be selling into everyday grocery. And so part of this transition for them was to realize that, hey, they could keep their premiumness and still identify retail partners and channels that could hit their growth and profitability. So we knew that they would be in more of the higher end grocery stores, not just that, but it allowed them to move just from being e-commerce and dabbling in wholesale to really realizing that, look, they've got to embrace several different channels. So that where to play for them was really critical, as well as to identify bolt-on acquisitions to expand their space to get to that goal. That company also, from that 5-year plan, was able to find an investment group, and actually the owners wanted to exit, and they were able to successfully do that from our plan. So let's get into our approach of how we handle strategic planning. Executive teams are great at activity planning. And from working with clients over the past 25 years, we know the leadership can have trouble making hard choices. This is where we come in to build the strategy development competency and continually help nurture it. Plans and activities are not strategy, and not solely what strategic planning is. Think back to your last vacation. How did you approach it? What was your plan? Well, you probably had to choose a city and book flights, make dinner reservations, decide what activities you were doing, who was coming, etc. But before any of that, the best vacations start with direction or purpose. Answering the why. Why are we going on this vacation? What do we want to get out of this vacation? If you don't answer these questions first, if you just pick a city and start planning, you're constantly going to battle with options. One person wants the luxury hotel close to the restaurants. In our culture with the city life, one person wants the remote bike and beach time. This is where strategy comes in. Until you decide on a direction, all the planning in the world keeps you busy, but doesn't guarantee success. Developing a strategic plan is answering what is the goal and how we are going to win. Valen's approach is to provide a proven process to develop the strategy and provide the whole organization, a business unit, or a functional group their 3 to 5 year strategic priorities, defining where to play and how to win. There's a further distinction between corporate and business unit or operating strategy that's important for organizations to understand the types of strategies they should develop. We are focused on operating strategy here. These parts fit together. Many organizations have a vision that would guide everything. So we start to link our mission and values to strategic direction. We make choices on where to play and the 3 to 5 year strategy on how to win. These choices, that is your strategy, then drives the resources and functional priorities to support the vision, mission, and strategy of the organization. Sometimes it becomes clear that the vision, mission, or core values need to be updated, which should be done in a separate process. We understand that strategy during any given cycle can be anywhere from a refresh to a holistic next transformation. The process stays the same, but the preparation and focus for that situation ensures we get results from this best-in-class process. Furthermore, to ensure good results, we provide a small experienced team to guide the process. The first best practice is to prepare well with a strategic conversation prior to planning, and this leads us to our first guidance. We set the clarity of direction with the strategy process. Strategy is a set of choices. The first choices begin with deciding your direction in the right arena where you actually have a shot at winning. Strategy isn't about predicting the future, it's about choosing what future to pursue. So we'll utilize these inputs to define strategic direction for planning. The market and company analysis, owners or board level guidance and boundaries, core competencies, to lead in strategic questions to get to your problems and opportunities. That's going to drive strategic direction. Now that starts really with a strategic conversation. That conversation, when we have that, we need to summarize and articulate who are we, right? Set the boundaries of what this strategy and the plan is supposed to deliver. What strategic questions, as we said, do we have? And it clearly sets the direction of strategy development. Here are some examples of strategic questions that we would ask. What do we do well? What are our core competencies? How do they differentiate us in the marketplace? How much growth do we have in the next 5 years to decade? What's our growth gap? Etc. So these questions are really what's going to set us up to make sure that we have a great strategy development process. Pre-work, as we talked about, you can see here industry and related trends. What's our current state? What are our competencies? Really, what do we do well and kind of uniquely? Historical metrics, of course, and so on. The second thing is precise choices. So strategy isn't a list of initiatives. It's a set of hard choices backed by commitment and defined resources. Teams can at times confuse activities with direction. They chase growth in all directions, conflate tactics with strategy, and try to please too many stakeholders. Without a shared view of where to go, grounded in facts, aspirations, and constraints, teams burn resources and lose momentum. Many times we find that we don't have a strategy problem, we actually have a decision problem. Our approach helps leadership surface the right questions, align on what matters most, and confidently say no to distractions. So the strategy workshop contains really a couple days of a process that we're going to define our company strategy direction. I'll get into that in a second, but basically in the morning, we're crafting strategic direction. Afternoon, we're to play. Day 2, we're going to ideate and prioritize how to win strategies. And then we're going to finalize that strategy and action plan into a rhythm and where we go. All right. Where to play explained. So where to play focus areas are the critical choices a company makes to define where it will compete and allocate resources to achieve strategic goals. So it's answering questions like, what's our business scope? What won't we do? It might be something like expanding into underserved geographic markets or developing service line X or Y. So it looks like this. From strategic direction, we come into the process, we identify all these areas of where we might want to play, we sort them, we challenge and prioritize them into really a small set of strategic priorities or focus areas. Okay, so from those where to play focus areas, we need to make sure, is it clear about what winning looks like? We want to focus on the customer or market. Does it frame the trade-offs and focus, inspire bold, aligned decisions? Does it feel real and motivating to the team? So from there, we move into how to win strategies from these focus areas to say, okay, in this focus area 1, 2, 3, we build out where to play. We're going to rank and risk some of those, rank and identify the risks. We're going to create hypotheses of potential strategies and draft objectives, goals, and initiatives. And then we're going to be looking at high-level supporting capabilities and activities. So when we're developing great strategy, we want to make sure that there's a strategic focus that is narrowing down the arena of competition clearly. For instance, at Hillshire, we're not a commodity meat supplier, we're a meal solutions company. Is it customer specific, right? So young professionals, urban markets, as a defined customer base. Problem-led, what problem or unmet need are we serving to get there that we can win on, which leads to differentiation potential. So where we can play and win, not just play, and enable trade-offs. So if you don't have trade-offs, then anyone can do it. So part of this is making choices and resources that are hard for someone to copy and do that so that you can do something well and create a competitive advantage. The last area is operating with focus. This is where many plans fall apart. Too often strategies reduced to a collection of slides and vague aspirations. What's missing is translation. That's turning direction into clear, prioritized actions, defining owners, and the timing. Then you're going to assess trade-offs and identify risks. This ensures the strategy doesn't just live in documents. It drives decision-making and shapes resource allocation. The best strategic plan is one that your team actually uses to run the business. So remember this, great strategy doesn't sit on a shelf. It lives in calendars, meetings, and operating rhythms. So we use OGSI, objective, goal, strategies, and initiatives. So you're going to see that here in our how to win format. So drilling down a little bit further on how to win, you might have priorities in growth, competitiveness, operational effectiveness. That's a whole strategy, right? That's not just about sales and marketing. That's about how we operate. It's about how we drive effectiveness in the organization, not just growth and forgetting about profitability. So really these 3 buckets are important for priority build out. Then those priorities that we showed you, those objectives, goals, strategies, key initiatives are there. Then we will roadmap that out, through your multi-year process with owners, et cetera, as we've talked about. So the last piece is about rhythm and accountability. So when you manage a strat planning process, you're managing progress updates. So you're going to want system visibility somewhere, spreadsheet, software, and you're going to want to cascade reviews from leadership to their staff or their line. So you're going to have weekly check-ins, which are done, not dones, monthly progress, accountability, resources, due dates, is what you're focused on at that monthly level. The quarterly debrief, where you're learning and adjusting that quarterly breakdown of your plans, and then planning next quarter. And then, of course, you've got your annual planning and your long-range plan update. So that's how this all fits together, from long-range planning into that weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual updates. And then the last piece is the functional supporting plan. So typically you also have plans by function that need to support the strategy. And so those will be outlined as well in the annual operating plans as you develop what you're doing. So the last piece of this is that there's team and individual coaching that's really necessary, as we talked about, to build this culture of strategy and build that competency of how to make choices in strategy and find the best way to win and where you're going to play. Thank you.